Morning, everyone. How y'all doing? By the way, I'm from Nebraska. I'll say y'all. So have you ever heard the cliche that our world is more connected than before? Anyone? Do you really feel that way? Does that seem true for you? Because I know when I open my social media in the morning, or flip open the newspaper, or I'm listening to the radio as I'm taking the kids to school, it feels like our world is more disconnected, more divided, and even more isolated than ever. And at the same time, our world is facing some of the greatest, most complex challenges we've ever seen. And so at a time when we should be coming together, it feels like we're drifting apart. Why is that? Our bodies are wired to see threats. Our bodies are constantly scanning the environment around us and looking for threats, and when we see those, our immediate first instinct is to push back or to run away. That classic fight or flight response. Now I want to share a relatively simple example from my own life. And to set that up, I need to tell you a little bit about my friend Mike and what he's meant to me. So the last time that I was here at the Hero Roundtable, I told you a story about how I stood up and confronted a dangerous, destructive, even potentially deadly culture in my organization. And when I did that, I was forced to move out in the middle of the night. I lost dozens of friends in a single night. And as you can imagine, I had no idea who I could trust. But one of the people that I knew I could count on was my friend Mike. He was my greatest friend, one of my greatest champions and supporters at that time. He was truly a rock for me. Now, over the years after all that happened, Mike and I have found ourselves sometimes at different sides of some of the thorny issues of our day. And because Mike lives about 1,500 miles away from me, we frequently engage in those discussions online. So one night as we were going through one of those particularly heated conversations, and I'm sitting there pounding away on my computer, going back and forth with him about, whether he was wrong, whether I was right, I felt myself falling into that threat response. I felt myself intimidated. And for whatever reason, when that kicked in, there was no holding back for me. I was no longer focused on our discussion, our exchange of ideas, but I truly wanted to obliterate his point of view. I wanted to prove just how wrong he was. And so I pounded out my response, I hit send, and the only thing I did was I obliterated our friendship. And I truly lost one of my greatest friends in that moment. Joseph Campbell said that when we quit thinking primarily about ourselves and our own self-preservation, we undergo a truly heroic transformation of consciousness. And this isn't just some philosophical fluff. This is deep in our own biology. Our bodies are wired this way. I told you our first response is to push back or to run away. But when we shift our focus from ourselves to somebody else, our body gives us a whole different set of those chemicals that flow through our bodies. They make it easier to form relationships that cause us to bond with others. And they also sharpen and clarify our thinking and give us even greater abilities in problem solving. So when we stop thinking about ourselves, we truly transform our consciousness. Now, this isn't one of those moments where I say we need to, kind of all stand up, let's hold some hands, and just forget about our differences. Because as I said at the outset, we are facing some very real, complex problems in our world. Problems that we can't solve on our own, but that we together can take on and truly solve. So how do we do that? I had the great fortune of spending some time in Rome about a year ago, and I marveled at the architecture, not just its beauty, but how so much has lasted for so long. And nobody was better at building arches and bridges than the ancient Romans. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from those techniques that they used in architecture to how we build bridges in our own relationships, in our own lives, in our own communities. The first principle I want to tell you about is we have to have the vision that we can assemble together. And we do this through our sense of community, that we are truly all one circle of humanity. So before a bridge is built, and you've got the two pillars on each side of the bank, remember that those pillars of strength are grounded in and of themselves. There's a security there. And so I know in our world today, there are some of us that are more safe to take risks than others, just based on some of the identities and backgrounds and experiences that we hold. But when we have that security and that strength, and we know who we are and what we stand for, we also then have the potential and the ability to reach out and to form a bridge. So the first step is we have to see that potential. We have to look at that gap and say, there's something there. There's something there that we are stronger together than we are apart. We have to believe in that. The second piece is where we build our scaffolding. And so the ancient Romans would take a temporary wooden structure, and they would use that to build the arch on until that longer-term structure was built, and then the scaffolding would come away. And for us, that temporary scaffolding is communication. And as some of the folks yesterday talked about, this isn't just the communication of speaking and being a really articulate speaker and being able to convey your message in the perfect way. This is about courageous and vulnerable communication, which, by the way, is a two-way street. I want to focus on that word courage. Too often we associate it with these militaristic and warrior and kind of bravery, valor type terms. But let's remember that the word courage originally means to speak from one's heart. It is very much a feeling word. Now, Guy Windsor from yesterday, when he was doing the sword demonstration, I probably don't need him to tell me this, but I think the worst possible battle position is to expose your heart. That is true vulnerability, to really share what is going on in here. But then also to listen with your heart, to really listen to not the strategies or the tactics or the policies of what the other person is saying, but listen to what's really going on in their feelings. Because I hate to break it to you, our brains are wired in a way that we rationalize a lot of our decisions, but our decisions are really based in instinctual feelings that go on in our brains. And we need to begin communicating directly into that heart with others. And you think about Oprah Winfrey, one of the greatest interviewers of all time, right? What makes her so great? Is it that she's a great speaker? She is. Is it that she's a great influencer? She is. Is it her enthusiasm? Yes. But the thing that truly sets her apart, people come to her, they seek her out because she makes people feel heard. I want you to think back to the last powerful conversation you had. How much of that time did you spend talking versus listening? Because I bet if you think about your best conversations you've ever had, you spent a lot more time listening than talking. You truly learned about somebody else. And when somebody else feels heard, it's not because of what you said, it's because of what you did. The third step is constructing the keystone, and that's compassion for us. So in ancient Roman architecture, that keystone is the heavy block in the center. And the weight of that, and mind you, I haven't taken physics since high school 25 years ago, but the weight of that block in the center pushes the other stones down and kind of compresses them, locking them into place. So this is what gives those bridges their endurance. And for us, this is compassion. We are all human. We all make mistakes. We all hurt others, and we all will be hurt by others. We cannot change those facts. But when we meet them with compassion, and yes, we can still hold people accountable with compassion, we can truly keep that bridge in place and lock it in where it allows us to deal with those issues that our world is facing. So at the outset, I told you about my friend Mike. 1,888 days later, shortly after my book came out, I really felt the loss of our friendship, and so I wanted to reach out to him. Now, when I wrote the book in the acknowledgments section, I include a little sentence about what Mike has meant to me. I took a picture of that and I sent it to him. And when Mike got that, he immediately responded and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Minnesota in a couple weeks. I'd love to get together and talk." And when we got together, we didn't go back and dissect that issue and talk through it again, but we met each other with compassion. We truly met each other in a way that our friendship was put first, and that we then talked about the issue second. We talked about why that was important to us and where that came from. We met in that place of exposing our hearts to each other. And I know that we'll make mistakes and we'll get in these tussles again, but that compassion will truly keep this friendship in place. And I wanted to give you a relatively simple example because in our world, and especially here, we talk big and bold, and we want to change the world. Well, I think the Romans were pretty good about transforming the world of their time. Their architecture exists to this day, and it's because they built those bridges. And I think if we're going to truly take on the challenges of our time, the more bridges that we can build, the more that we can see across difference and agree to come together to talk about what is really going on, the more powerful we will be. As Joseph Campbell said, we transform our consciousness when we stop thinking about ourselves and our own self-preservation, but that's also the best way to transform our world. Thank you.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.